3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files. Last time, we followed Epstein's charitable foundations and how he used philanthropy to buy access and claim donations that never happened. Today, we're looking at the corporate credentials, the board seats, and advisory roles that made a man with no college degree look like a vetted insider. As always, every document and source we reference is available at epsteinfiles.fm. So there's a version of Epstein's personal website archived from 2011, 3 years after his conviction, and it lists him as chairman and CEO of Financial Trust Company, member of the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the New York Academy of Sciences, former Rockefeller University board member, and a Harvard Advisory Committee member. It even has a quote from President Clinton calling him a highly successful financier. How did a man who falsified his resume at Bear Stearns end up with credentials like that?
It's a question of institutional failure, really. When you trace the documents chronologically, a very clear pattern emerges. It's a pattern of transitive legitimacy.
Transitive legitimacy.
Exactly. Institution A assumes Institution B did the vetting. Institution B assumes Institution C did. It goes all the way down the line. But if the very first link in that chain is fraudulent,
then the whole structure is compromised.
The entire structure. And the documents indicate that for Jeffrey Epstein, that first link broke in 1976. The system just started out. It didn't register the break for more than 30 years.
So we have to start there, at that first break. The origin point, Bear Stearns, 1976.
That's the one. It's the credential that underpins everything else. You see it on every bio, every board application, every press release, for decades.
Former limited partner at Bear Stearns.
That's the foundational claim. But the personnel file, the one that was uncovered in that New York Post investigation from late 2025, it tells a very different story.
So he's hired in 76, 23 years old.
23, as a junior assistant in the options department, a very junior role.
And his qualifications on paper.
Well, that's where the discrepancy starts. The application form we've reviewed lists degrees from two different very reputable colleges, Cooper Union and NYU.
2 degrees.
2. But the documentation from the National Student Clearinghouse and the direct inquiries made by forensic auditors confirm he didn't have a degree from either. He hadn't graduated.
So he was a college dropout.
He was. Before Bear Stearns, his only real job was teaching physics and math at the Dalton School. And even that position, the records show, was obtained through a family connection, not through any formal academic certification.
So he walks into a Tier 1 investment bank having lied on a federal form about his education. That seems significant.
It's a material fabrication of fact. In the securities industry, this isn't just puffing up your resume. The U-4 form, the internal compliance documents at a place like Bear Stearns, they require absolute, verifiable accuracy.
Why?
Because it's a matter of fitness and propriety. The entire model is based on trust. The thinking is, if an employee will lie about their degree, what's to stop them from lying about a trade or a client's position?
It's grounds for an immediate bar from the industry.
Usually, yes. It's supposed to be. And the audit trail is clear on this. He was caught. This wasn't something that slipped through the cracks.
Oh, the internal compliance department flagged the discrepancy.
They did. The logs show it was flagged during his tenure. And under any standard operating procedure, that should have triggered an immediate termination for cause. It's the kind of black mark that ends a career on Wall Street before it even begins.
But that's not what happened.
No, he wasn't terminated. He was protected.
And this is where Alan A. Greenberg comes into the picture.
Precisely. Ace Greenberg was the CEO of Bear Stearns, a legend, a titan of the trading floor. And at the exact time this resume discrepancy was flagged by compliance, Epstein was dating Lynn Greenberg.
The CEO's daughter.
The CEO's daughter. The reporting from the NY Post and other sources establishes this relationship as the primary variable that changed the outcome.
So the CEO steps in and overrides his own compliance department.
It's more subtle than that. The documents don't show a formal override memo, which is actually very telling. A memo would create a paper trail.
So it's inaction.
It's inaction. The termination order that should have been issued just wasn't. It was halted. And instead of being fired for resume fraud, Epstein is essentially granted what you could call a protected status inside the firm.
And that leads directly to the 1980 promotion.
It's the critical event. 4 years after lying his way into the company, he is named a limited partner.
That title, limited partner, it sounds less important than, say, a managing director today. But in the 1980s...
In the 1980s, on that version of Wall Street, it was everything. Bear Stearns was still a private partnership. It wasn't a public corporation. To be made a partner meant you were part of the ownership class.
You were inside the tent.
You were inside. And it implied that you had been subjected to the most rigorous vetting imaginable, that your character, your background, your revenue generation, all of it had been scrubbed and approved by the other partners who were putting their own capital at risk alongside yours.
So by giving him that title...
They laundered his history.
They erased the lie.
Exactly. It was a complete institutional override of a known fact. And when he leaves Bear Stearns in 1981, he doesn't need a college transcript anymore. He has something far more valuable.
He has the title.
He is former limited partner at Bear Stearns. For the next 30 years, that is the master key. That's the credential that opens every other door. When he eventually meets people like Les Wexner or Leon Black, they aren't asking to see his degree from Cooper Union.
Of course not. They see Bear Stearns' partner and they assume...
They assume the due diligence was done back in 1976. They assumed he was vetted by the best. It's the closed loop you mentioned earlier. The lie becomes truth simply through institutional repetition.
And that fraudulent credential was absolutely necessary to secure the next piece of the puzzle, the engine.
Yes, the thing that converted that static credential into actual power and capital.
Which brings us to Leslie Wexner. The year is 1991, and the document is a power of attorney.
This is the document that turns the potential energy of the resume into kinetic energy. It's the fuel. We've reviewed the filing, which was detailed by both Business Insider and the New York Times back in 2019. It is not a standard investment advisory agreement.
The scope of it is unusually broad.
It's a total abdication of financial control. The legal language grants Epstein, and I'm quoting from the document's analysis, full power and authority to do and perform every act and thing whatsoever.
Every act and thing.
It's breathtaking. It explicitly allows him to hire and fire Wexner's personal staff, to sign checks of any amount, to buy and sell real estate, to borrow money in Wexner's name, and, critically, to sign his tax returns.
Signing tax returns is a major fiduciary responsibility.
It's the ultimate level of trust, and the analysis of these documents consistently uses the phrase, virtually no oversight.
Which is not normal.
It's the opposite of normal. Any standard wealth management contract, especially for a client of that size, is filled with checks and balances, limits on transfer sizes, requirements for countersignatures on assets over a certain value, regular reporting mandates. This power of attorney had none of that. It effectively made Jeffrey Epstein the legal and financial avatar of Les Wexner.
Why does that matter so much for building his credentials? It's a private arrangement.
Because it allowed him to operate with the leverage and the credibility of a billionaire before he had accumulated any significant personal wealth. When Epstein walked into a bank or a real estate negotiation or a meeting with another financier, he wasn't operating with his own money. He was operating with the full, unchecked weight of the L Brand's fortune.
So he was able to mimic the behavior of a titan of industry.
Perfectly. And he began translating that private power into public credentials. We see this very clearly in the Ohio Public Records, the New Albany Company.
Right. This is a crucial piece of the paper trail. Records from the Ohio Secretary of State dated 1998.
And in those public records, Jeffrey Epstein is listed as co-president of the New Albany Company.
Alongside Wexner himself.
Alongside Wexner. And New Albany wasn't some small side project. It was and is a multi-billion-dollar master-planned real estate development.
So by listing him as co-president, Wexner put him on the public record as an operational executive.
It's no longer a backroom advisory role. This isn't some shadow advisor. This is a corporate officer with fiduciary duties listed on a state-level public document. Anyone running a background check on Epstein in, say, 1999 or 2000 would find this. And the conclusion would be inescapable.
This man runs major companies. It validates the Bear Stearns title all over again.
It builds the next layer of the facade. And then there's the philanthropic layer, the Wexner Foundation.
He was a trustee.
A trustee for 15 years, from 1992 all the way to 2007. This is covered in the independent review of the foundation itself, commissioned in 2020.
And what did that independent audit find regarding his actual contribution to the foundation?
That's the striking part. It found nothing. Zero. The report states, quote, he played no meaningful role.
No meaningful role.
He didn't screen participants for their prestigious fellowship programs. He didn't attend policy meetings. He had no engagement with the actual philanthropic mission. The report described him as, and this is another quote, a functionary executing documents.
Just signing things.
Just signing things. So the question is, why hold the seat for 15 years if you're not going to do the work?
Credibility arbitrage.
So it's a perfect term for it. Being a trustee of the Wexner Foundation gave him automatic peer status with the heads of other major philanthropic organizations. It got him into the rooms, the galas, the summits, the closed-door meetings. He was using the Wexner Foundation's sterling reputation as his own. He was borrowing it to network with his next tier of targets.
The scientists, the academics?
All of them. But there's a darker layer to this relationship. The Department of Justice memo from February of this year, 2026, suggests it wasn't just about borrowing reputation, it was about direct financial extraction.
This is the memo that contends the allegation from Wexner.
It is. The memo outlines Wexner's claim that Epstein, quote, stole or misappropriated several $100 million during the time he held that power of attorney.
Several $100 million.
The scale is almost hard to comprehend. For years, the public narrative, and narrative Epstein himself carefully cultivated, was that he was a financial wizard who was making Wexner enormous sums of money. The DOJ memo suggests the exact opposite, that the wealth transfer was predatory. It was a siphon.
Is there documentary evidence to corroborate that claim of theft, beyond the allegation itself?
The property records provide the clearest, most compelling evidence. You have to look at the transfer of the Manhattan townhouse, 9 East 71st Street, an asset valued today at approximately $77 million.
And the deed shows the transfer from a trust controlled by Wexner to an entity controlled by Epstein.
Yes, but the price is the key. The transfer price listed on the deed is $0. Let's be clear. In the legitimate commercial relationship, you do not gift a $77 million asset to your financial manager. It doesn't happen. If it were a performance bonus, it would be documented as income and it would be taxable. A $0 transfer on an asset of that magnitude points to something else entirely.
It suggests coercion.
Yeah.
Or a settlement of some kind of unstated debt. Or
just outright misappropriation, executed using the unlimited power granted by the power of attorney document. And then you have the other bookend to that transaction, the 2008 stock transfer.
This is right before his first jail sentence.
Just before. Epstein transfers $46 million worth of Apple stock back to the YLK Charitable Fund, which is the Wexner Family Foundation. Yeah. And the ledger, the internal accounting, characterizes this transfer as a partial repayment.
Partial repayment. You don't repay a client if you've been generating legitimate returns for them.
You repay them if you took principal that you were not entitled to. The word repayment is a functional admission of an unauthorized withdrawal. The audit trail from the townhouse to the stock strongly suggests that the financial genius was simply siphoning capital from the main account.
So we have the fraudulent foundation at Bear Stearns. We have the predatory engine of the Wexner relationship. This brings us to the next stage, manufacturing the insider persona through board seats.
Right. This is where he takes the borrowed capital and credibility and converts it into institutional affiliations. If you go back to that archived website from 2011, the list is designed to be overwhelming. Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, New York Academy of Sciences, Rockefeller University.
Let's start with the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR. This is the heart of the foreign policy establishment. How does a man with his background get a seat at that table?
He buys it. The Washington Post investigation from September 2019 really broke down the mechanics of it. The entry fee was purely financial. The documents show a series of donations from Epstein-controlled entities to the CFR totaling around $350,000.
That seems almost shockingly inexpensive.
For the level of access it provided, it is a statistical anomaly. It's a rounding error for these people. For $350,000, Epstein secured what they call Chairman's Circle membership.
And that's a specific tier.
A very specific tier. It's not just getting the magazine. It allows the donor to attend small, private, off-the-record dinners and briefings with sitting cabinet secretaries, ambassadors, visiting heads of state, prime ministers.
So he's not just buying a membership, he's buying proximity.
He's buying proximity to power. And then he leverages that proximity. The moment he is in that room with a diplomat or a secretary of state, he's no longer Jeffrey Epstein, the college dropout from Brooklyn. He's Jeffrey Epstein, member of the Council on Foreign Relations. The institution itself acts as a filter. People in that room assume that you're there, you belong there, that you've been vetted.
They assume the CFR did the work.
Just like Wexner assumed Bear Stearns did the work. It's the same pattern.
The Rockefeller University affiliation is maybe the most prestigious scientific credential on that list. He was listed as a board member.
He joined the board in 1995. And the Rockefeller University board is not something you can just buy your way onto with a small check. It requires, or is supposed to require, serious vetting and a significant contribution to the field.
So how did he manage it?
Here we see the triangulation strategy in action. We found a document in the Epstein Files. It's cataloged as EFT 011279777.
And it's a draft gift agreement.
It's a draft agreement for a $10 million donation to Rockefeller University. But the critical detail is the donor listed on the agreement. It's not Jeffrey Epstein. It's Leon Black,
His other major client. So Epstein is brokering the donation from Black to Rockefeller.
He's the facilitator, the middleman. He uses his relationship with Black to bring a huge sum of money to the university, which in turn solidifies his own position on their board. Then he can turn around and use his board seat at a place like Rockefeller to demonstrate his influence and his connections back to his client, Leon Black.
It's a perfect self-reinforcing circle.
It is. He monetized his client list to purchase institutional credibility and then used that credibility to keep his clients loyal.
And he didn't just use these titles in meetings, he codified them. There's another document, EFT 005844016.
The standardized bio. It's an internal PR document from his own office. In it, we see the exact same paragraph, the same block of text, inserted into 3 different articles being pitched about science philanthropy.
It's a template, a copy and paste job.
It's a shield. The paragraph lists the CFR, the Trilateral Commission, the Rockefeller Board, the Harvard affiliation, all of it stacked together. By putting these 4 or 5 heavy-hitting credentials in every single public mention of his name, he created a barrier.
A barrier to inquiry.
Yes. A journalist or a compliance officer looks at that list. They might verify the first one. Is he a member of the CFR? Yes, he is. And the density of the other credentials discourages them from digging further. You assume someone else down the line do the verification.
Which brings us to the Harvard credential, the visiting fellow appointment in 2005.
At the Program for Evolutionary Dynamics.
The internal review that Harvard's Office of General Counsel released in May 2020 it's incredibly blunt about this.
It is. The report states unequivocally that Epstein, quote, lacked the academic qualifications necessary for that appointment. He was being made a visiting fellow in psychology. He had no degree in psychology. He had no peer-reviewed publications, no academic standing whatsoever.
So how does an appointment like that happen at Harvard?
The report points to a direct transactional relationship. The professor who recommended Epstein for the fellowship, a man named Stephen Koslin, had received $200,000 in research funding from Epstein right before making the recommendation.
So it's a direct line, money for title.
The university's own review concluded that Epstein produced 0 substantive academic work during his fellowship. No papers, no lectures, no meaningful research. The fellowship was a purchased asset, nothing more. It was acquired solely to be another line item in that standardized bio to validate the science philanthropist persona he was so carefully constructing.
And while he's building this academic and philanthropic facade, he's also constructing the corporate shell game in the background, the offshore structures.
This is where the paper trail gets truly complex. The centerpiece of this structure was the financial trust company, which was domiciled in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
The 2011 website lists him as chairman and CEO of that company.
We have documents to back that up. There's a memo from August 2006, document EFT EF 000614037. It's a directive for $40 million in hedge fund redemptions, and it is signed by Jeffrey Epstein, president of Financial Trust Company.
Why go to the trouble of creating a trust company? Why not just manage the money through a personal account or a simple LLC?
Optics and access. A trust company, even a privately held one in an offshore jurisdiction, implies a level of institutional governance. It implies compliance, officers, a board. It allowed him to interface with the prime brokers, the big banks like Citibank, JP Morgan, even his old firm Bear Stearns, as a peer institution, not as a high net worth individual.
So when he calls the trading desk, he's not just another retail client.
He's the president of the Financial Trust Company. It professionalizes the flow of funds, and just as importantly, it adds a crucial layer of opacity. It makes it harder to trace the ultimate source and destination of the money.
And in these offshore files, we also found a surprisingly persistent link back to Bear Stearns, Liquid Funding Limited.
That's from the ICIJ Paradise Papers leak. A massive trove of documents. Liquid Funding Ltd. was a Bermuda-based entity, and the records show Epstein served as its chairman from the year 2000 to 2007.
This is nearly 20 years after he officially left Bear Stearns.
It is. But if you look at the capitalization table for liquid funding, you see that it was partially owned by Bear Stearns.
So the relationship never really ended in 1981.
It just evolved. It went offshore. He maintained a formal, documented corporate role as chairman of a Bear Stearns-affiliated offshore vehicle right up until the firm itself collapsed in the 2008 financial crisis. This reinforced his claim to be a Wall Street insider. He could legitimately say he was a partner in their high-level, complex financial structures.
But when forensic auditors finally mapped out this entire corporate empire, the infinite means narrative that he projected, it starts to fall apart.
It completely disintegrates. The 2020 estate inventory listed 25 separate shell companies. Southern Trust, Plan D, dozens of them. Forbes did an analysis of this in July 2025. The total value of assets held within this web was around $636 million.
A lot of money, but not the multi-billionaire status he claimed.
Not even close. But the most devastating finding was from the client audit, the verification of who was actually putting money into this system.
How many verifiable arm's-length clients did they find?
Two. Leslie Wexner and Leon Black. That's it. There's no documentary evidence of a broad, diversified client base. No pension funds, no university endowments, no sovereign wealth funds, none of the typical clients for a financier of his supposed stature.
So the whole thing was a closed loop.
It was a mirage. The documents strongly suggest that the primary activity of these 25 shell companies was to move capital between each other, creating the appearance of trading volume and a diversified financial institution. But it was just a churn. It was a circulation of capital from two primary sources, designed to look like an empire.
A system that worked, that held together for 3 decades. But when the man at the center of the web finally fell, the institutions that validated him began to face their own reckoning. The collapse.
It's the reverse domino effect. The transitive property of credibility works both ways. If you borrow legitimacy from an institution, you eventually infect that institution with your own toxicity. Your liability becomes their liability.
We should track the resignations. It really starts with L Brands, with Wexner.
Yes. Les Wexner stepped down as CEO of the company he founded in February 2020. The board's failure to manage the Epstein connection was cited as a primary factor in the governance crisis that forced him out. But there was a quantifiable financial cost, too. The shareholders of L Brands sued the board in Delaware.
And they settled.
They settled for $90 million. And that settlement is significant because it wasn't just about the money. It included a mandate for sweeping governance reforms. The board, by agreeing to the settlement, essentially admitted that they had failed in their duty of oversight. They failed to ask the basic question: why is our CEO's entire personal fortune being managed by a convicted felon with zero formal qualifications?
From Wexner, the contagion moves to Leon Black at Apollo Global Management.
This was another firestorm. The New York Times reported in October 2020 on the independent review conducted by the law firm Deschert, and that review confirmed that Apollo had paid Epstein $158 million.
And these payments were made between 2012 and 2017, strictly after his 2008 conviction and jail time.
That's the crucial point. These weren't legacy payments. They were for ongoing services, described as tax and estate planning. The reputational damage was absolute and immediate. Leon Black was forced to resign as both CEO and chairman of Apollo, the firm he co-founded. He also had to resign as chairman of the Museum of Modern Art.
The cultural credential falls right alongside the corporate one.
The stain spreads across all the institutions he touched.
Next, Jess Staley at Barclays Bank. This one involved a direct regulatory intervention.
It did. The UK's Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, launched a formal probe into how Staley had characterized his relationship with Epstein to the Barclays board. They found he'd been misleading.
And Staley's history with Epstein went back to his time at J.P. Morgan.
It did. And the irony is thick. At J.P. Morgan, internal documents show Staley was the senior executive who repeatedly argued to keep Epstein as a private banking client, even when the bank's own compliance officers were raising red flags and wanted him out.
So Staley protected Epstein at J.P. Morgan.
And years later, that very association cost Staley his own job as CEO of Barclays. He resigned in November 2021 as a direct result of the FCA investigation.
And finally, the academic hub of the network, Joy Ito at the MIT Media Lab.
This case really peels back the curtain on the mechanism of concealment. The internal emails that were leaked and reported by the New York Times were just explicit. One of them read, "Jeffrey money needs to be anonymous."
So they knew. They knew the source of the funds was radioactive.
They knew, and they took the money anyway. They just tried to hide its origin. And when that file was finally opened to the public, the collapse was immediate and total. Joy Ito resigned from 5 separate high-profile boards in the space of a single week.
5 boards.
The MIT Media Lab, the board of the New York Times Company, the MacArthur Foundation, the Knight Foundation, and a biotech company called PureTech Health. It was a clean sweep.
He was the central node connecting Epstein to that world.
He was the hub, the connector that linked Epstein to the worlds of technology, media, and academia. And when that hub failed, the entire network just disconnected.
So we have the fraudulent resume, we have the predatory power of attorney, we have the purchased board seats and the sham corporations, we have the resignations. If you synthesize all of this documented evidence, what is the operational model? What was the mechanism?
It's a 4-step cycle, a repeatable process of manufacturing credibility from nothing. Step 1 is fabrication. You start with the initial lie, the fake degree at Bear Stearns. That establishes the fraudulent baseline.
Secure.
Step 2 is authority. You gain legal control over a legitimate fortune, the Wexner power of attorney. This provides the capital and, more importantly, the proxy status to act like a billionaire.
Step 3 is using that authority.
Step 3, laundering. Use that borrowed authority and capital to buy your way into legitimate institutions. The board seats at CFR, Harvard, Rockefeller University. You are laundering the dirty money of your fraudulent past into the clean currency of institutional prestige.
And the final step closes the loop.
Step 4, verification. You then use those hard-won board seats and affiliations to retroactively validate the initial fabrication from Step 1. No one questions the Bear Stearns resume of a man who sits on the board of Rockefeller and is a fellow at Harvard.
And the institutional failure of due diligence that allowed this?
It was systemic. It was a chain reaction of trust. The Compliance Week case study that analyzed this laid it out perfectly. Institutions failed because they relied on internal references, on the prestige of the previous institution in the chain. Harvard trusted him because he was on the Rockefeller board. Rockefeller trusted him because of his deep connection to Wexner. Wexner trusted him because he was supposedly a partner from Bear Stearns.
And Bear Stearns only trusted him because he was dating the CEO's daughter.
It's a closed loop, a perfect circle of manufactured credibility where no one at any point ever stepped outside the circle to conduct genuine external verification.
The documents show a closed loop of manufactured credibility. There was no external verification, only internal reference. Next time, the regulators who looked the other way.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.